Today, Mike Rothschild is with us, the investigative journalist focusing on the intersection of internet culture, politics, and conspiracy theories, specifically QAnon. He's the author of the new book, The Storm Is Upon Us, How QAnon Became a Movement, Cult, and Conspiracy Theory of Everything. He's also contributed to the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, CNN, MSNBC, the BBC, and elsewhere. Mike, welcome to the program. If we could, and also Rothschild MD is the Twitter handle for you. If we could start at the beginning, your first chapter is Learn to Read the Map, the basics of QAnon. What are the basics of QAnon?
Sure, and thank you for having me on the show. The basics of QAnon is actually a more complicated question than you might think, because QAnon Now is a very different movement than QAnon in the very beginning. But we'll start at the very beginning and then we'll go from there. So QAnon at the very beginning was a cult-like conspiracy movement that holds that a secret military intelligence team was working with President Trump to leak cryptic clues to an upcoming purge of the deep state, the Democratic Party, and the business elite that would be carried out with a clutch of hundreds of thousands of sealed indictments that would be unsealed in a public spectacle with the president tweeting, "My fellow Americans, the storm is upon us." And at that point, thousands of patriotic teams would go into action, arresting all of these people, trying them under military tribunal rules, and either executing them in the field or shipping them off to Guantanamo Bay.
Shades of the French Revolution. I mean, it's...
Oh, sure. Shades of 1,000 different conspiracies and mass movements and sort of populist uprisings where the rabble would pick up arms against the people that had been oppressing them, and we would have utopia and freedom and peace and light for everybody at the end of it.
Right. So that's where it started. Where is it now?
Right now, as you know, or hopefully you know, Donald Trump is not the president anymore, and Joe Biden is the president.
I believe
now.
I know
Presumably,
that.
yes. You would be surprised at who doesn't. The presumption is that Joe Biden will not arrest himself as a part of the deep state. So the QAnon movement now is really refocused not on Trump unleashing this purge, but on being restored to office through any number of court cases, lawsuits, constitutional Hail Marys, and now this idea that he will be reinstated because there was so much electoral fraud that the state legislatures will have no choice but to decertify the electoral votes that they certified, and that through some sort of magic that no one can quite articulate, Donald Trump will be restored to office, or he's been president this whole time. It really depends on who you talk to in this movement, sort of how deep down the rabbit hole they go of, is Trump secretly still the president? Will he be the president again? But at the end of it, Trump is in office, back where he belongs, and then we'll just get right back to the business of waiting for the great purge to come.
We're talking with Mike Rothschild, the author of The Storm Is Upon Us, this new book about QAnon that's just absolutely mind-boggling. Mike, back in the I mean, this is a long time ago, the story I'm going to tell you, back in the 60s, in 1968, I think it was, or 67 maybe even, I was, maybe 69, I was working in news at WITL in Lansing, Michigan, and the state policeman, a federal guy wearing a suit with a badge, and a local cop showed up at the radio station and took me and Bob Brakeman, our news the head news guy, whatever his title was, aside and said, "There's this group down the road here in Lansing, Michigan, that we're going to raid. We're going to have a huge raid on this compound. And these people, we're charging them with tax evasion. These people do not believe that America is legitimate. They believe that they are sovereign citizens, independent of the United States. Therefore, they don't have to pay taxes. And we would appreciate it if you did not discuss this on the news if it breaks through, because we're trying to keep this on the down low, sort of thing." And Bob and I had a big debate about whether we should respect their request or not, and we ultimately did. It wasn't my choice. But that was in the 60s, right? I mean, that was a long friggin' time ago. And it sounds to me like this is kind of an extension of that weird ideology. And I'm seeing an enormous amount of crossover between the sovereign citizen movement which has dates back to arguably to the 1800s, and QAnon.
Yeah, and one of the things that you really realize, and what I wanted to get across with writing the book, is that while QAnon seems very new and very sort of the 21st century zeitgeist, all of the component parts of it have been around for a long time. You go with everything from the blood libel of the 1100s to the Satanic Panic, to scams of the 90s and of the aughts, the John Birch Society, the tax protester movement. All of this stuff was sort of recombined to form QAnon. But when you take that social media friendly sheen off of it, you really see the component parts, and it's very easy to lay those things bare. So you really do have an enormous amount of crossover in these anti-government movements, these anti-tax movements, the anti-expertise movement that has really taken over the Republican Party. But, all of that stuff is very old, and taken on its own, it can be sort of debunked. But QAnon combines all of it, and when you debunk one part of it, another part of it just pops up, and at some point you just get tired of it and you move on to the next thing. So at the beginning, where QAnon in its modern incarnation, first emerged early in the Trump. This was early in the Trump presidency. Am I correct? Yeah. And tell us about the message board that it came out of, and what's the deal with the pig farmer in the Philippines? So those are great questions. So QAnon's genesis really came from this remark that President Trump made in October of 2017. It was October 5th. So its fourth anniversary was just a couple days ago, where, as you were reading about, he's in this room with these military officers and their spouses, and he said, this could be the calm before the storm. Nobody has any idea what he's talking about. It's one of those things he just says. It doesn't mean anything. He never gave it a second thought. But somebody on this board, 4chan, really liked how that sounded and really liked the response that got. So 4chan had been the home of any number of everything from sort of harmless internet memes, things like Rickrolling, to really toxic stuff, really racist stuff, really anti-Semitic stuff, and in particular on the 4chan board called Poll, P-O-L. And I do not recommend anybody ever go there for any reason. You do not need to experience these things firsthand. So there was a tradition on this board, Poll, of anonymous users pretending to be important. So you had FBI Anon, you had White House Insider Anon, you had an Anon who called himself Highway Patrolman, who claimed to be intercepting convoys full of trafficked children. I mean, just nonsense. So on or about October 27th, 2017, somebody posts that Hillary Clinton is going to be arrested. Just whatever. So
was this all? If I can interrupt you, were these characters in these posts being done like satire, like pastiche, where everybody understood with a wink and a nod that this was just, hey, we're just having fun here?
It's always hard to tell who knows what's fake and what's real in places like 4chan. But right. My general understanding is that everybody knew that this was a goof. Nobody took this seriously. It was just a game to play along with. And whoever did it really well could do it for a long time before they got figured out. But what Q did, and they weren't even calling themselves Q in the beginning, was Q focused their story around not the sort of chicanery in the FBI or the White House, but around the one event that conservatives have been yearning for the last 3 decades, which is Hillary Clinton to get what's coming to her. So the first post of what we now know as Q was Hillary Clinton will be arrested on November 3rd or whatever the day is at 10:45 a.m. Extradition already in motion. Her passport has been flagged. Look to see the Marines and National Guard in your streets to know that this has happened. So right away, you have not only 3 decades of wish fulfillment in Hillary Clinton being arrested, but concrete signs that something amazing is about to happen, something gigantic. And of course, this is all tied in with this conspiracy theory that had been going around about an Antifa uprising that was going to happen on November 4th. So you already had all of these people really charged up that Antifa members were going to suddenly riot and go door to door, arresting or kidnapping or killing Trump supporters, and that the Marines were going to be called up to stop it. And all of these things combined to form this very compelling, very well-told, very thrilling story that really seemed to be out of the pages of a Tom Clancy book, this sort of national upheaval, and these people had an inside seat to it.
So, Mike, the calm before the storm. Have we kind of covered how QAnon started? How did, and if not, feel free to fill in the blanks. But I'm interested in this transition from being this obscure, weird kind of semi-pastiche thing on a message board to suddenly a movement that has millions of people in the United States.
Yeah, so what happens with these first couple of posts is the people on 4chan who fancy themselves, very savvy and very cutting edge, they don't think it's anything. They're making fun of it. But the Q poster keeps going, and they keep adding more and more details to the conspiracy that they are concocting. And one of the things you learn as you research conspiracy theories is the more details that get added on and the more outlandish those details are, the more believable the conspiracy becomes.
Correct.
So as Q continues to load this thing up with rhetorical questions and dates and times and events, people start to get into it. People start to really buy into this story, partially because it's just really interesting and sort of fun to watch unfold, but also because it really dovetails with the things they already believe, that Hillary Clinton and George Soros and Barack Obama are irredeemably corrupt, and Trump is going to be the guy to take them down. He's the outsider who doesn't need that Washington swamp, and he is going to stop this. So Q continues to gain popularity as we go into late November of 2017. And what happens is you start to see the first big promoters show up, people who start decoding these drops, trying to figure out what they really mean, and start to evangelize the movement to other people. So you see very early on these very, very low-level right-wing content creators, people I talk about in the book, people like Tracy Beans, Baruch the Scribe, people you would never have heard of before, who would maybe get 1,000 views for a YouTube video they would do. Suddenly they start making content about QAnon. And they're talking about, well, is it real? This seems legit. This is really cool. Let's see what happens. These videos really start to take off. So by December, YouTube, there is already a nascent industry of QAnon promoters. And then in December of 2017, two of these people go on InfoWars. And this is really what causes the movement to jump from just the swamps of 4chan to the normie spaces of Reddit and Twitter. They say this is an intelligence operation that's going to change the world. We're the first people here. We're decoding these messages, but we need your help. We need the help of people in the military, in intelligence, people who are skilled in cryptography. And suddenly all of these InfoWars watching, fake news spreading boomers who love Trump are like, oh, this is cool. I can get in on this. I can help make this happen. I can play a part in bringing these horrible people to justice. And at that point, QAnon is just out of the bottle, and it is spreading.
So the Alex Jones was the guy who supercharged this thing and pushed it into the larger world.
Yeah, it's really the InfoWars empire. Alex Jones and Jerome Corsi, the sort of right-wing celebrities.
I know
Jerome
both.
Corsi. Oh yeah, Corsi was beloved in those circles for writing the first big book, questioning where Barack Obama was really born. And he gets in on decoding these threads, pumping out tweets. This thing becomes legitimate because of these people.
Yeah. With Mike Rothschild, the author of this extraordinary new book, The Storm Is Upon Us, How QAnon Became a Movement, a Cult, and a Conspiracy of Everything. So QAnon starts out on 4chan. It migrates to Alex Jones. Alex Jones blows it out. Suddenly now it's on social media. It's on Twitter. It's on Facebook. And it's beginning to make its way into the larger right-wing media sphere. Does it show up on Fox News? Where and when does it break through? And at what point does the media start saying, hey, wait a minute?
So all of this is happening very quietly. For the first maybe 8 or 9 months of QAnon, there are very few people in the mainstream media taking this seriously. And at face value, why would you? It's just more weird internet stuff with a president whose sort of existence revolves around weird internet stuff. But at this point, it really is starting to gain followers. It's starting to gain a monetization industry. A lot of the major gurus and content creators in the QAnon world pop up here, and they're finding enormous success. You got one of the cases I write about in the book is this guy who goes by praying medic, and he's this divine healer who gets dreams from God that tell him what's going to happen. This is a guy who is making sort of divine healing videos. He's getting a couple thousand views. He starts talking about QAnon. All of a sudden, he's got 500,000 Twitter followers. His YouTube videos are getting six-figure views. He's got books coming out. He's got a podcast. Money is coming in hand over fist. All of this is happening while the media is just not getting what this is and really writing it off. And we're still at that point where we think, well, if we don't pay attention to it, if we don't amplify it, it'll just go away. Of course, now we know that that's not how these things work. If we don't pay attention to them, they just grow with nobody watching them. So Q's big breakthrough in the mainstream media is August of 2018. And I think it's August 1st. And Trump has a rally in Tampa. That rally is absolutely swamped by QAnon believers. People wearing QAnon T-shirts, holding up QAnon signs, shouting QAnon slogans. And at that point, you've got pretty much every major media outlet going, oh, wait a minute, we got to talk about this. So everybody and their mother has an explainer on what is QAnon, who is QAnon, who are these people, what is this, do we have to take this seriously? And at that point, it's got a huge following, it's got a mythology, it's got a grifting industry. The president is already retweeting QAnon followers. He's not directly using QAnon terminology, but he's throwing out red meat to these people who believe that he is not just a great president, but an infallible messiah who can do no wrong, and is running this secret military operation that's going to save the world. And this is all happening while people are just not paying attention to it.
So at what point, well, how many Americans at that point in 2018 were, in the cult, shall we say, and how many are now?
It's very hard to pin down any kind of numbers with QAnon, because when you start asking questions that are specifically about the movement, do you believe QAnon is real? Do you read Q drops? People go, I'm not one of those crazy people. I don't believe in QAnon, but I think that there's a deep state, and I think that Donald Trump, actually got 6 million more votes than he says he got, that there's child trafficking, that George Soros runs the world. All of those are QAnon tenets, the core of QAnon. So they don't identify as QAnon believers. They just believe everything that QAnon is already saying, and they probably already did before that. The biggest demographic in QAnon, it's not white people, it's not, men versus women. It's people who are already conspiracy believers. These are already people who were 9/11 truthers, already people who were Barack Obama birth certificate truthers, Trump Spygate, any number of conspiracy theories that have been fed to them over decades by right-wing media. These people were already all in on this stuff. QAnon is just one more conspiracy in a ladder of conspiracy theories.